and at Terps prosperity, as well as some spring training with the Orioles and Ravens residue. But all eyes on Atlanta and Super Bowl 53. I hope to see this guy there. He is a run-and-gun gangster in a sad, restless age, and certainly has had some thoughts on running the ball and Lamar Jackson and his one-time algebra student, Joe Flacco. He is in the swamps of Jersey on the Philadelphia side. He is the lead writer for all things Bleacher Report and the National Football League and the BR app. We welcome Mike Tanier back onto the program. You can follow him out on the Twitter thing, where he still features football strategy from the Avalon Hill Company in Baltimore, Maryland, 1962. What's up, Tanier? Happy 19 to you. Last time I think we talked, Joe Flacco was still an NFL quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens.
Happy 2019. And definitely last time we talked, at least the Ravens and the Eagles were still in the playoffs. Although now I think about it, it may have been so long ago that they didn't look like they were in the playoffs, and they made those runs late in the year that made them a little more relevant for a little longer.
Well, the Eagles hung in there 7 more days than the Ravens did and certainly succumbed at the end and put up a better fight than some of these other teams did over the weekend. Lots of angles to go. We're going to be in Atlanta in a couple of weeks. I hope to visit with you there and certainly have an imbibement or a refreshment, courtesy of Roger Goodell in the league, of course. The Ravens and what happened here. I haven't talked to you. I follow you on Twitter. I think literally the last time I think we spoke was right around Halloween where Flacco was getting injured. We're going into that. You have a pretty special relationship with Joe because he was a 16-year-old kid in your algebra class many moons ago. A fascinating turn for him and the franchise and Lamar Jackson and the run game and what the Ravens are going to do after Ozzie. But now Flacco goes to the market. We're going to find out whether the Ravens can fetch a 2 or a 3 or a 2 and a 6 or something for him, right?
Yeah, and it might be something like that. The market keeps changing. The market changed very recently when Kyler Murray declared for the draft, and the market changes in that Nick Foles is almost certain to enter the market. And Foles and Flacco are going to be in that same tier, so to speak. Teams are going to be looking for those guys. Flacco is going to have to be a trade situation unless he's out and out released, which I think is going to be the last course of action, whereas Foles is a pure free agent, or is going to be once he opts out of his contract. So, that changes the equation a little bit. But there's a market out there for veteran quarterbacks, and there are a couple of teams that clearly look like they would prefer to have a veteran quarterback. If you look at the Denver Broncos, look how John Elway is structuring that team. They now have a experienced defensive coordinator, head coach. Those guys don't like develop working quarterbacks. So Broncos would be in that market. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be in that market. You look at Tom Coughlin, the guys he's assembling down there. They think they can turn things around fast. They don't want to develop a rookie. So there's going to be a couple teams out there. The question is, if those teams are out there and there are several quarterbacks, it's a little more of a seller's market than a buyer's market, what that means for Flacco and the Ravens in terms of what they get both in trade compensation and probably some kind of restructured contract.
Every story has an ending, right? And I guess in Joe Flacco's ending, it was an injury. He might play. He could play. He's getting healthy. He's back. They kept winning with a completely different structure, with a completely different base offense. And then when it came time to maybe summon him off the bench down 3 touchdowns, the word was, well, he hadn't really thrown to these guys, and they haven't really drawn up these plays, and wouldn't be fair to put Joe in there. I'm a little shocked that John Harbaugh, being the ultimate sort of my guy, I go with my guys and loyalty and all of that, that Flacco got pushed off the edge of the bench into the abyss. I thought he was playing better football than that in September and October, Mike.
I think he played pretty well stretches down the line, but there's nothing that unusual about how this story ends. You draft a quarterback in the first round. The starter holds him off. Yes, there's a nagging injury. There's also a little bit of a losing streak. There's a little bit of a slump in there, and the other guy gets his chance, and it electrifies the crowd. That's the plot of Any Given Sunday, isn't it? I mean, it was enough of a cliche for an Oliver Stone movie 15 years ago. We kind of know how it ends. And, that final game was weird. I mean, the moment that Lamar Jackson started playing poorly in the Chargers game, I was on Twitter, and it just erupted, and it was silly. Like, when's Flacco coming in, et cetera, et cetera. People didn't want Joe Flacco. There weren't national people clamoring for Joe Flacco. Let's be frank. Nationally, Joe Flacco was a punchline for several years among all the smart Alex on Twitter. All of a sudden, they want him. No, they want a controversy. They want gossip. They want rumors. That's what they want. And, credit Harbaugh. He didn't kind of play into that. I thought he was going to pull Joe off the bench as well. Instead, Jackson gets out there at the end of the game, makes a run of it, gets a couple touchdowns, makes it close, takes it down to a last play. Yeah, he fumbles on the last play, but kind of flips the script. They come back in March and April. No one remembers how that game ended. The final score's close. The final stats look okay. Lamar Jackson's the starting quarterback of the team. Greg Roman's now the coordinator, and this is how we're moving forward. That's how the story's going to start when they hit OTAs. Had he done something else, I'm not sure if that would have been the same conversation. And credit for Harbaugh for maybe looking down the road a little bit and realizing that.
Mike Tanier is here. He is with Bleacher Report and BR.com and the app. He'll be in Atlanta in a couple of weeks, as will Luke and I, broadcasting from Radio Row. He hails from Jersey and is the one-time math teacher of Joe Flacco. That being said, legitimately, that being said with Lamar and what happened with the offense and what a left-handed way it forced so many teams to play, and how San Diego took 2 weeks and caught up with it. Gus Bradley's a pretty smart guy, despite what happened in Jacksonville. The Harbaugh clan was outcoached in the game, didn't have a backup plan. We sort of knew that there would be no backup plan when they fell behind 3 touchdowns. And they've now committed to Lamar. And Mike, I spent most of last week discussing whether John Harbaugh might be the coach of the Dolphins or what was going to happen, and whatever kumbaya he's now had with Bisciotti, that he's going to be the guy here. I don't know that any of these other head coaches, the LaFleurs of the world, and all these guys that got jobs last week, would have looked at an empty Baltimore situation and said, yeah, I've got a franchise quarterback there. Me and Lamar Jackson, we're going to go in there for a decade. We're going to do things. I don't know, man. I don't know that anybody views this in that way or that positively. I don't know what Lamar Jackson flashed other than he can run a lot, and if he can ever throw the ball and can stand in the pocket and they can protect him, maybe he'll be something special. But I still, despite the gaudy winning streak and all of that stuff and all the excitement, I still don't know what we have here.
Yeah, on the coaching market, if you go out there and say, look, you can be with Lamar Jackson, the problem is there's another team saying, look, you can be out there with Baker Mayfield. Another team saying, look, you can go out there with Sam Darnold. Another team with, Rosen didn't play well, but you can kind of try and offer that. That's what the Cardinals could offer. And you had Jameis Winston out there as well. You had a lot of teams saying, look, we have a young quarterback out there we need to work with a little bit. So, if anything, it's kind of like even or among them. And I think Mayfield would be at the top of that list no matter how much you like Lamar Jackson. So there's an element of that. When you watch this game down the stretch, you recognize where the weaknesses were. And I think if you're a coach looking at this team, you say, I can see where the weaknesses are. The Chargers spotted it as well. He doesn't reset his feet when he's throwing towards the sidelines down the field, so those passes are very inaccurate. They're a little slow. He's not comfortable with them, and you can see the Chargers took everything in the middle of the field away. Not only did they take the running and option away to a degree, they took the entire middle of the field away and said, let's see what you got up the sidelines here, and Jackson didn't have that yet. Now, as a coach, you say, I know how to fix that. Greg Roman's getting promoted, and he's like, I know how to fix it. It's not something you necessarily fix when you have a rookie coming in, and he's trying to learn an entire playbook, and you're showing him slash plays, and all of his mechanics or fundamentals are crazy, and you just want to try and get him kind of viable. And it's not something you can fix on the fly at the end of the season, too. It is something you can fix in the offseason and make a priority and open up that element of his passing game and of his consistency and accuracy, while at the same time, altering your offense permanently to meet his strengths. So it would have been an appealing job. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Now you can look at this coaching staff and say, well, do you like the coaching staff? Do you like Harbaugh, Wink Martindale, and now Roman getting promoted? I think that's a pretty good staff. Stack that up against the staffs that most of these young coaches are assembling right now. It's a good one with a promising young quarterback, and that gives the Ravens a lot more optimism for future years than some of the teams even that have been eliminated from the playoffs in the last couple of weeks.
Well, Mike, I mean, let's be honest. 8 weeks ago, 10 weeks ago, Harbaugh was gone. There was going to be a parting of the ways, even at Halloween. Then the Ravens make a statement, you're not coming in here and taking John Harbaugh away. We got a year left. Now he's the village genius again, and Marty's thrown off the boat. And I'll say this, Mike, and we could say this about Lamar Jackson in some sort of negative way, but I can say this about John Harbaugh. I went through the list of all the names last week, and if John Harbaugh would have gone off the side of the boat to the Dolphins for a second and a fourth or whatever, they would have worked out, and the Ravens would have had to go out and hire I'll give me John Harbaugh over most of these guys not named Arians, right? Like when it comes to whether I want Freddie Kitchens or whatever being my coach, or Greg Williams, or whomever is left at the till of retread coaches that you might want to bring in, or the hot defensive coordinator of the Cowboys that everybody seems to have passed on at this point. You could do a lot worse than having John Harbaugh run your program around here, and I think Steve Bisciotti thought the better of that, and I think the better of that as a fan, seeing what the pool was out there for these other jobs.
And let's look at it another way, because you talked about how Harbaugh was as good as gone, and then 8 weeks later, he's fine. Dallas Cowboys were in the same situation. They seem to be keeping Jason Garrett. Now, you compare Harbaugh to Garrett, and you're like, yeah, I'll take Harbaugh. You look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think there was a point there where we thought maybe Tomlin was going to go in the brouhaha of all the San Antonio Brown stuff and their collapse late in the year. Tomlin's safe. His coordinators, who have been getting kind of pushed around all year, they're safe. Would you rather have Tomlin and his staff than Harbaugh and the slightly adjusted staff? I think you would take Harbaugh in that situation. Houston Texans look like they were done early in the year, and then they go on a run because J.J. Watt's awesome and Nuke Hopkins is awesome. Now they're keeping Bill O'Brien. Would you rather have Bill O'Brien and his staff, where the best they can do with all these Hall of Famers on their team is get to around 9-7, or would you like to take Harbaugh that kind of manufactures playoff runs and manufactures a Super Bowl run? When you look at it that way, you can say, yeah, this team is able to adjust on the fly, play a little bit of next man up, do some of these other things, and get more out of less than some of these other teams. And that's another reason to look at it and say, yeah, this is a good option, the guy we kept, as opposed to some of the guys that the other teams kept.
Nobody covers the National Football League better than Mike Tanier at Bleacher Report. You can follow him at Mike Tanier on Twitter. That's Tanier. You'll see the big Baltimore Avalon Hill football strategy out on the front. All of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at Cole Roofing. Bill Cole's going to be here to do a little analytical work on me here later this week. We're going to talk some Terps, talk some Orioles, get ready for Atlanta and Super Bowl 53. The coffee in my cup is poured by our friends at Royal Farms Coffee, always brewed fresh and always with the fried chicken. Been a couple weeks since I've picked up a Rofo chicken box over there with some Western fries and some ketchup and a roll with it, baby. I do gas up. Pull out your Rofo rewards card. Make sure you're using that when you're pumping your gas. You get your fried chicken and your Western fries free of charge at Royal Farms. Real fresh, real fast. Last but never least, my dear friends at the Lee Tessier Realty team, selling my condo, and they can sell yours as well. I'm going to be getting together for a crab cake up at Box Hill Pizzeria with Lee Tessier. You can find him at Lee Tessier. That's Tessier. They've been doing this real estate thing for about 50 years right now. They know it inside and out, so I don't need to learn all the laws and all the rules. I just trust my guys. LeeTessier.com. Mike Tanier is our guest. He is at Bleacher Report and at BR.com and the BR app. If you're using that, you will see all the preview and all the work getting into this weekend's games. Look, before I get to the Final Four here and the good teams, let's talk about the teams that got bounced a little bit. Certainly Colts and Chargers didn't have what it took. The Eagles, even more interesting now that they've done two relatively deep playoff runs here without Carson Wentz, right? I mean, they haven't even had all the bullets in the gun, and they've won a Super Bowl and taken a team on the road 2 weeks in that might win a Super Bowl 2 weeks from now, right?
Right, and it's a remarkable front office and coaching job. And I know that there's some Eagles fans listening, like, coaching job, Jim Schwartz did this with the defense, and Groh did this as a play caller. The overall coaching job that says, we lost all the guys in the secondary, let's put these other guys like LeBlanc and Maddox and Sullivan in there and coach them up and get success. And that's something that the defensive staff did. It's been a revolving door of guys starting at quarterback, going through all the skill positions most of the year for the Eagles as well. And they managed to put together this run on offense. And what we're going to see next year is we're going to see it's going to be Carson Wentz's team. Nick Foles, again, there's no way you can really keep him if you do the math of the salary cap and the reality of the situation and don't make up a controversy because you want to talk about something. Foles is going to be gone. It's going to be Carson Wentz's team, and they have a very old core, but now they've incorporated some young guys this year. It's going to be interesting to see what they do moving forward. Another thing I took away from this season is after that loss, tough loss, ends with an interception, kind of goes through Alshon Jeffrey's hands. The positivity coming out of that Eagles locker room was remarkable. It's a different way of approaching things, Doug Peterson slapping guys on the back, everybody rallying to support Jeffrey, things like that. Those are the things that kind of carry over into March or April. This is a team that's not going to be talking about a quarterback controversy, kind of like the Ravens. They're going to be talking about, here's Carson Wentz, here's what we accomplished last year, and let's get back to work. And I think that's going to be a nice carryover for 2019.
You mentioned coaches sticking around and coaches leaving. You're up there in the swamps of Jersey on the filthy side, and Andy Reid, has to pack up his bags and go out to Kansas City. And, I talked a lot about this, about John last week, and I didn't give you a chance to do that. You haven't been on in a couple of months. But, John had that opportunity last week to walk into Steve and say, you know what? I need a second dream.
Right.
I need what Belichick has had in New England, which is a second chance after Cleveland. Parcells used to pick up and do this every 4 to 6 years, right? We've talked about it. Tony Dungy had a second dream. John Gruden's working on a third dream, right? So Dick Vermeil took 20 years away and came back into 2 more dreams, right? So, when you stick in one place, that's an amazing thing for what Mike Tomlin has done, for what Marvin Lewis attempted to do. And Sean Payton, much like John Harbaugh, was gone in New Orleans, right? Yeah. The owner was dying. He's fighting with the daughter, fighting with the wife. Everybody's fighting the storm. And yet here we are in 2019. They got a home game. Drew Brees is still the quarterback. Sean Payton's still the coach. They've survived Bountygate. They survived hurricanes. They've survived the death of Benson. They've survived, Brees survived the Miami Dolphins and the San Diego Chargers, and Phillip Rivers is still playing quarterback. It's incredible, but the New Orleans story is one of the really great stories in modern sports if they go win a Super Bowl 3 weeks from now, man.
Yeah, and when you evaluate coaches when they have a down year or two, you do have to kind of look really across the entire organization, the entire structure of what they've put together, and see if the fit still makes sense. And yeah, clearly down there in New Orleans it did. Some of the things that happened when they were as good as gone, it was the Bountygate stuff, which, he was an ancillary player and that he got suspended for it, but it was clearly not his call there, so he kind of took the fall for it. Then he had all those defensive coordinators after Greg Williams who couldn't coach, and so that kind of took its toll down there. But if you look at the structure of the organization, the power he has, it was incredibly important to that organization, even as they went through tumult, to keep him in place, and that's how he that's how he stayed in place. Andy Reid got an extra chance or two in Philadelphia, and Jeffrey Lurie stood on the podium and said it's because of the incredible esteem he's held with around the league. It's the incredible esteem he's held with within this organization here that we do it. It's when that element of things goes sour, that's when this second dream is required. Like both parties kind of have to move on from this, and that's how the decision is often made. So in the case of Baltimore, you had Ozzie Newsome moving on. That would have been the time. But you look at, again, there's like a flexibility of the coaching staff, and you say, I can do this, I can change this, I can change coordinators, I can do some other things here, I can change quarterbacks, and now we've demonstrated we can do this successfully. That's what helps sustain a coaching staff, and maybe a part of it is to agree that Harbaugh isn't a play caller. Right? He's a top administrator, that he can imagine this team just by promoting a guy or bringing a different guy in. It's not like it's his offense, it's his defense, it's his structure. And when you do that, it's a little bit easier to be that CEO and say, look, we can adjust on the fly. He's got that. I don't think Peyton has that as much, but he has that to a degree on defense, and that's what keeps these coaches viable.
Mike Tanier is here from Bleacher Report. I highly recommend you follow him out on Twitter as well as at BR, and download the BR app as well. We'll be together in Atlanta, GA, 2 weeks from now. We got 3 football games left, not if you count the Pro Bowl, and I know you and I will be gathered around the TV sets on Sunday night for that down in Atlanta, making fun of that. The thoughts about these teams and where Brady is, and you mentioned these legendary coaches and guys that have already won, and guys like Andy Reid, who is trying to seal his legend by getting that elusive ring that did not come as a quarterback coach with Brett Favre. And then there's McVay, right, which you look at this and say, well, he's going to win 5 because he's so young, and here we are. We might have thought that about Gruden 20 years ago, right? And he went a whole different direction with his life. We may have said that, early on about Andy Reid and Donovan McNabb 15 years ago. it's hard to win, and you're at that point now where if you're New Orleans, and certainly if you're Kansas City, these are the best opportunities. These are the best four teams. They were clearly above all the rest of the teams most of the year, even though New England was breaking apart and TB12 and Guerrero and all that awful stuff. And here they are 60 minutes away from wrecking our, the first Sunday of February for everybody again. But the four best teams, we should expect good games this week, right?
Absolutely. By about week 12, and we can, the Patriots stuff and the drama there. By about week 12, if you asked anybody to be honest and not to do a hot take and name a sleeper team to be cool and stick out, most people were going to be like, oh, it's going to be the Rams and the Saints, and it's going to be the Chiefs and the Patriots. We saw them all kind of play each other in a round robin during the season. Just about everybody faced each other, and the final score was 45-40 or 43-40 each time. And that's what makes it exciting here. And what's cool about these teams is, they're the offensive juggernauts of the NFL. If you look at their defensive rankings, they're pretty low. The defensive teams like the Bears are gone now. They're offensive teams, but that doesn't mean that it's like silliness. It's not just, go for broke, bombs away type of thing. These are teams that are balanced, that run the ball very well, that are creative, but can also kind of are very fundamentally sound. With the exception of the Chiefs, they all have defenses that are credible, and the Chiefs do have a great pass rush, so they can give up a bunch of points and then sack you 3 times to win the game in the end. So they're all teams that have a lot of different things to enjoy about them, have a lot of strengths, not that many weaknesses, and they also look different on the field. And I think that's cool that you can watch one offense that looks one way, one offense that looks the other way, so you can look at these things, and the games are going to look different depending on who has the ball. And that's a great treat for both the casual fan because they're seeing something that's kind of unique, and some of us like junkie type guys who are like, oh, look, that's a variation on this offense, that's a variation on that offense.
Brady and where he is in all of this, and sort of the quietness of how the quiet assassins, right? I mean, they have just sat in the corner all year, done what they do, watched the rest of that division flail around and change coaches and change quarterbacks and change everything. And, all they did was go out and run up a 4-touchdown lead, an hour into the game last week against a team that had been thought to be a juggernaut and came in here and put the clamps down on the Ravens the week before. It's a miraculous thing, and especially when you talk about the cast of characters there and how many people have changed, and when you compare this version of the Patriots with Rodney Harrison and Teddy Bruschi and Richard Seymour and, name any of the better players they had back then, Randy Moss, whoever you want, Matt Light, name any of those guys, Joe Andruzzi. I think most of America's hard-pressed to name 5 New England Patriots right now.
And that's it. It's remarkable what they've done, but this is they've done things that are similar to what they did when they started their run back in 2001. When Tom Brady replaced Drew Bledsoe, Tom Brady was one of the guys you couldn't name in 2001 that year. It was like that team consisted of Ty Law and a bunch of guys, and they won a Super Bowl. And then, of course, they became the most famous team in the NFL and all these great superstars. But some of the biggest contributors right now are guys that aren't talked about. Trent Brown was a guy they brought in to play left tackle, was on the 49ers, wasn't really well known, was just kind of like an okay player. He was playing lights out. He was stoning great pass rushers last week. He's one of them. On defense, Trey Flowers, Stephon Gilmore, these are guys who are playing at an all-pro level. They don't get the accolades that, Aaron Donald, Khalil Mack do. Maybe they're not quite at that level, but they work so well within the system. And one of the things that the Patriots has done for all that time is they've changed and adjusted their systems. What they're running right now is this really multiple running game that then plays off of it with some play action, lots of screens, lots of shovel passes, lots of little outlet passes, things like that to kind of help Brady if he's not able to fire 35 yards down the field to Randy Moss anymore. He can still kind of distribute the ball, and it works extremely well, overwhelm the Chargers, and they're going up against the Chiefs in what's it going to be, 11 degrees or something like that next week. There's an Arctic blast coming into Kansas City. They've got an offense that's ready to play like a running game, a conservative game, a ball control game in this icy cold temperatures. They've won championships by doing stuff like that at home in the snow in Foxborough before, even 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15 years ago, and they have a chance to do it again because they're so diverse, because they're so multiple, and because they execute so well.
Mike Tanier here from Bleacher Report. You can go follow him at the BR app as well as at Bleacher Report and on the Twitter thing. Hey, I'm looking forward to seeing you in Atlanta. I'm a veteran to these wars. I remember when Atlanta was one big coated sheet of ice 20 years ago now for the Tennessee Titans and the then St. Louis Rams. Might have the Los Angeles Rams. I think there might be some new blood here. If we get the Patriots out, right, we would at least have an interesting mix of people and personalities down there. And I guess if you get the Patriots down there, at least you get ISIS and the big bad wolf that we can all try to beat up on, right?
It's funny because you're Patriots fans. If you say anything even remotely critical about the Patriots, they just come after you in droves. And then they say, "Well, why do you hate us? Why are you so jealous of us?" It's like, because we've been dealing with your team. We've been dealing with your.
I'm very succinct, dude. I just say because you cheat. You know what I mean? I don't like cheaters. And I always joke with people when it's all over with, someone, Shaughnessy or somebody, going to get a hand on this up there and find out what they've been doing to really cheat all these years. Whether they really have been bugging locker rooms or had passcodes like the Cardinals and the Astros. Because, there is a feeling when they go out and do that to the Chargers like they did last week, you're like...
Right.
You know the plays they're calling. Like, what are you doing? What's did you have cameras in the oh, no, you did that before. You confused the officials. No, that was 5 years ago. Let's see. You had a murderer in your club. No, that was a few years ago. What's good? I'm wondering what the story that comes out of all of this. And I think everybody loves that palace intrigue about them. There is a part of them that in the modern era, they have provided an incredible boost to the league by being so dislikable, I think, right?
Yeah, they're the Royals, and not the Kansas City Royals, like the royalty in England, where you always gossip about them and you chirp about them, and they're glamorous and they're successful, and you kind of resent them a little bit, and then you admire them a little bit, and they kind of do that. Brady is like a prince, and Giselle is like some kind of like beautiful princess, and then you have like the dark king at the top, and you have like Rasputin, which is Alex Guerrero running around like with magical potions or whatever he does, and you can create this crazy fairy tale drama about them. And it keeps things interesting. That said, the other thing that would keep things interesting is getting some different teams in there, some younger players, so some guys who talk a little more, some guys that we're a little more fascinated with as news stories at this point. And it's hard to not root for that a little bit as somebody who has gone to many, many cities and had watched Tom Brady roll his eyes at questions for hours and hours over and over and over again over the years.
I watch these games when we get eliminated just to figure out like who my friends are and what teams they're on. And I'm pulling for Schwartz and I'm pulling for Mike Nolan and Ken Whisen, people I know. And I thought, there's nobody associated with the Patriots. I can hate on them. I hate the fans. All of it, right? And then Albert McClellan falls on a ball on special teams, and I'm like, that's so typical of the guy who was the most popular guy in the Ravens locker room, the guy who was always on the fringe of the roster, always in, always could count on him if somebody got hurt and put him in there to know the plays and whatnot. And that's such a 10-year Patriot guy for Belichick to pull the 54th guy off a John Harbaugh roster to fall on a ball on special teams. And I'm like, that's who they are with Rick Lyle and Anthony Pleasant and these guys that were just always on the fringe of, even Junior Seau and Randy Moss. These 30-something guys that are never going to hurt you with their brain, right?
And that's it. You say, "Oh, I hate him," and then you look at the stories of some of the guys they dusted off, and it is, they pull people who are getting third chances. They pull guys who were cut 4 times on other teams, and that's part of their excellence there, because we think of coaching as you call a play, and it was a smart play or it was a dumb play, and you throw something at the screen or whatever. And coaching a lot of time is that bottom of the roster, when those guys are just running drills and running through tires or whatever, identifying the guy that was cut 3 or 4 other times and saying, he's going to help us more than the kid we drafted in the 4th round or the guy who's been here 5 years or whatever, and getting him ready to play. And that's something that Belichick does. It's also something Andy Reid did very well. And let's not forget that's something that through Ozzie Newsome and that entire organization, the Ravens have been very successful at in the past as well.
Belichick took a lacrosse stick out of Chris Hogan's hand and said, "You look like a wide receiver. You'll catch 60 this year. Go run around. Look for number 12. Hey, man, a pleasure as always. See you in Atlanta. Love you. Appreciate your work, and appreciate the time as always.
Absolutely. Take care and see you in Atlanta, man.
Mike Tanier joining us here from Bleacher Report, and the BR app is always downloadable. That's what he always says. Just tell him about the BR app. Go to Mike Tanier out on Twitter as well. A great follow for all things football and sometimes comedy as well, a little bit of rock and roll. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'm out in the Buy a Toyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST.net, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.